Okay, so one thing which Manchester is known for is its storytelling. From the nation's longest-running soap opera to the acclaimed Manchester International Festival and the glut of heavyweight drama produced and written here. However, we're not satisfied to merely look at the past. Oh no. Manchester is also leading the way with technologies that will determine how we tell stories in the future. So to discuss some ways this is manifesting itself, please welcome our 4 panellists. Daniel Kokotajlo, Valentina Ventimiglia, Daniel Gray, Simon Lumb, and to chair the discussion, Fiona McGarva, Festival Director of Design Manchester. Please welcome to the stage.
Hello. Hello. So, good afternoon. As Georgie just said, this panel is all about storytelling, and we've got some amazing storytellers here to talk about the different projects that they're working on, and then to look towards the future to see how different technologies are shaping how we tell stories, what things are going to be happening next, and what things they're doing next. So first of all, what I wanted to do is just introduce each of our panellists and talk about basically what it is that they're doing. So I thought it might be best to start with Dan Kokotajlo.
Okay.
Just because, obviously, you have just made Apostasy, and that was made via iFeatures. So just kind of coming off the back of what Paul said, I thought it might be quite interesting to talk about your experience of iFeatures and how it worked for you.
Okay, yeah. It was iFeatures 3, so it was the same round as Lady Macbeth and the Levelling. So we took a little bit longer in script development. So the film is coming out this year. It's just been at festivals. It's still doing festival circuit.
It's had some incredible reviews.
No, it's doing really well. Yeah, we won an award at London Film Festival, and Curzon Artificial Eye are distributing it in the UK, and we just sold it to Amazon as well in various territories. So it's doing really well.
Amazing. So it's filmed and set in Manchester. So I thought, obviously we're in Manchester, and Creative England being such a regional specialist, it's interesting to talk about how region and place affects filmmaking and how it affects stories. How did it affect Apostasy?
I think, it is very important in filmmaking. I think a sense of place and time is an important kind of texture to the filmmaking, and you can have a sort of sense of place in a film, but then also it can be more of a character. Like, I think Manchester by the Sea is a good example of that, because Manchester in that film is about the character's guilt and his grief as well, and he escapes a place. So it's very important, and it is for Apostasy as well. It's set in Oldham. I grew up in Tameside and Oldham, so I've always wanted, and all my short films, all my work has been about Manchester and people in Manchester. I guess just growing up, I felt like there was never enough of that on the big screen. So.
Is there anything you can tell us about filming, particularly in Manchester? Obviously, Mike told us before that this is going to be developed into an even bigger studio, so there's going to be more opportunity to film here. But yours is much more kind of location-based, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it all is, yeah. It's been fine shooting in Manchester, yeah. No, it's... all in all, most of my stories about people on low incomes and have a sort of working class mentality, so the films are shot there, and more or less people are happy for us to be shooting there. There was one housing association who didn't want us to shoot in a council estate because they felt like the story didn't show council housing in a good light. But we argued that, and we came to an agreement with them, so it was all right in the end. I think it's important for filmmakers to shoot on location. It brings a kind of realism to the story and a sense of connection with what's going on. It's important for me anyway to, I shoot on a street where I grew up, or I'll have my mates in the film, or I'll have somebody playing a background artist who's had a direct experience of what's going on in the story, because it gives you a sense of connection to it and a kind of responsibility to tell the story. Yeah.
I think yours is probably the most traditional form of storytelling. Moving on to Valentina Ventimiglia, which is a brilliant name. So you're an animator.
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us a little bit about your project that you're going to be doing with Sky Art?
Yes, my project is called Labuntina, and is basically, there are music videos of songs that I created for my daughter when she was little. By little, I mean 1 year old. And she needed some entertainment. And so I came up with songs, and being an animator, I thought I really should make something animated out of this. And also because my daughter would really, really love to watch nursery rhyme videos online. So I thought, this is it. I need to make videos out of them. And this is what I'm doing now, which is great.
So do you think that the platform that you're using, because it's going to be Sky On Demand, isn't it?
It is, yes.
So do you think that's affected the way that you've developed the programming, or did one feed into the other?
Yeah, well, basically I shaped this product, out of what I wanted and how I wanted to show it to my daughter, which I didn't know at the time, but is now how people show basically content to their children. I wanted something easily accessible, something short, something catchy that kids want to see the same thing over and over again. So this has worked for me. I think it was great timing. I didn't know that at the time. It was the mother experience that kind of put me in that direction.
So what was it brought you to Manchester? Because obviously you probably could have done
Work.
that from anywhere. Yes.
Yes. Well, I lived in the UK before. I spent 5 years in London. Then I took a break. I went to Italy, started a family. Then kind of felt a bit like I want to go back to the UK, but I didn't want to go back to London because it was a bit too overwhelming. And luckily, Cosgrove Hall was opening again and was hiring people. My husband and I are both animators, so we just were hired. And so we moved here in 3 weeks. And here we are. So I only lasted 6 months at the studio because then I needed more flexibility, but it all worked out well.
So you worked on Fantastic Mr. Fox and Frank and Weenie.
I did.
How does that kind of storytelling compare to the stories that you're telling now?
It's different because in such a massive production, you only get to do tiny bits that are important, but it's just like a piece of a puzzle. So there is still storytelling, but I've got a bit more freedom now to do because it's only a smaller product.
Fab. So that takes us on to Dan Gray, another Dan.
Yeah, two Dans on here. Just diversity in the panel.
So Dan, you're head of UsTwo Games.
Yeah.
And you developed Monument Valley and Monument Valley 2.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about how the stories work within those platforms?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be fun because in an effort to stay warm, I drank about 5 cups of coffee. So it's going to be a fun next half an hour. So, yeah, like when it comes to telling stories, at least in what I want, like my team to do, it's about telling stories that we don't think are present in video games. So, like an example for that would be Monument Valley 2, we focus a story around a mother and a child. Usually mothers are not present in video games at all. And when they are, they're usually seen as something to protect or something that's vulnerable. Some kind of escort mission, put it that way. And yeah, we really wanted to show this mother that had power and agency over the world and show this relationship between what it means to be a parent and how that relationship changes between a child and a parent through time in something that lasts about an hour with characters that have no faces in a world that nobody understands. So that was a challenge in itself. But yeah, really trying to kind of like throw caution to the wind and take risks. I mean, going on some of the themes that people talked about earlier, being able to take risks on stuff. Like we make paid games, right, which is a very kind of like rare thing within the mobile game space. But there's no way that we would have been able to convey that relationship of a parent and that story if we were constantly shoving ads in people's faces every 2 minutes or asking them to pay money for coins.
So it's a puzzle game format.
Yeah.
BAFTA winning. What do you think has proved so very popular about it?
I think the first thing was, I mean, game itself, even though the company's called UsTwo Games, we only use that as shorthand because people understand it. Like, really, when it comes to challenge in the games that we make, there isn't that much challenge there. You know, it's more like interactive entertainment. we be able to create kind of like game mechanics that amplify whatever emotion or feeling you're trying to get across at that time. So like an example for that might be if we're trying to show that this character is going through an emotional journey and is growing as a person, then we're going to manipulate this architecture and grow organic trees within this environment to kind of like raise this character to a higher space. How do we use game mechanics to tell that kind of story? And I think that's why people, you know, really resonated with people a few years ago. The music, the aesthetic, there's no lives, there's no failed state, there's no time. It's something that's more like an interactive storybook than it is a game, and I think that's something that people really want.
Can I just say I'm a big fan of that?
Oh, nice one.
Me
Thanks,
too.
mate.
Played audio.
Yeah.
Oh,
A lot of fans, a lot of fans.
It's for me, it was the way you used illusions, visual illusions, because surely it was inspired by MC Escher's paintings.
Yeah, that was one of the main things.
So it was the way you blended that with sort of puzzles.
Well, I think that's what you have to do sometimes when it comes to telling stories
Not to
in
brown noise
video
too much.
games. I mean, that's it. Like, whether we like it or not, your average person in the street, they think that games are about, you know, tapping candy and opening loot boxes. They don't know that they can have a story or an emotional connection to something. Yeah. So when it came to the, you know, the kind of like visual trickery of MC Escher, that was the way that we Trojan horsed story into people who wouldn't otherwise care. Like, how do we use that puzzle and that architecture to encourage someone to, you know, care about story for the first time?
So just finally to introduce Simon, I saved him to last on purpose. Because Simon's all about the future. I think all of the storytellers on this panel are looking at story in a very different way, but you're in research and development for the BBC. So, I mean, obviously that's a big topic, but can you kind of tell us a little bit about what it is that you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, so we are imagining a world when we switch off television. So it sounds quite dramatic, but what that really means is that sticks on hills are going to go away. We're going to sell them to mobile phone companies to give us all that juicy data we can waste our batteries on. When that happens, you've moved to a different distribution model, and that distribution model is the internet. And in a world where the internet is the place where you distribute content, and it's the place where you produce, combine, and kind of make your content as well, when you're always in that internet space, you have the opportunities of interactivity, of social connection, of communication and community between you and your audience that we see rising in certain parts of internet culture now. And what happens when that's applied to television? And what does it mean we can do? What does it mean for our animation? What does it mean for our films? And what it means is there's a new kind of format opportunity that's nascent, that's coming, that needs to be built. And so what we're doing in research and development alongside is something called object-based media. That's our kind of term for it. We're still working on it. It's not branded yet. But what it means is that you keep everything in bits until the point it gets to a person. And the point it gets to a person, you can adapt it to them. You can personalize it to them. You can give it to them in a form that they can interact with or they can play with. And we think that's going to lead to new types of content. We don't want any of the wonderful work and content to go away or any formats to be missing in the future. We just think that now there's a chance for new types of content that do that. So we're working on and how that works in the production sense, end to end, because you know, as everyone has kept saying today, it's really hard to make things. It's super, super hard. And you take people who are interested in moving into games or moving into other types of media and say, just go. It feels easy because the tools are there, but it's not easy to make a great thing. And so we have to work really, really hard to make sure that the people who have the insight, the aptitude, the inspiration to try it, can try it comfortably and for it to work. And for us, when we make our interactive cookery shows, for it to be as simple and easy as that, just going to the website. Remember that clip from Skylab where it's like the website and then it's like the swan's feet, like, wow, there's all this stuff underneath. And we've got to do that for that kind of media to be successful in the future. So that's, we're working really hard to try and build that.
Excellent. So Dan Gray. Oh, this is going to be difficult.
I know, yeah.
I'm going to have to use full names in a really weird fashion. Dan Gray.
That's what everyone says anyway, don't worry about it.
So, I mean, how do you feel about, you know, sort of the convergence between sort of television and gaming? Have you got experience of that, or is it something that you guys are looking at, or is it something that you don't want to do? I
mean, people have been trying to like combine industries for a very long time. So at least in the game space, we've spent a lot of time with games attempting to be movies. Like, you know, there's a lot of games that you'll play, it might take like 40 hours long and you have to watch. I mean, I love playing something like Metal Gear Solid, but your average person doesn't want to watch 4 minutes worth of cutscene to get a story. And I feel like we've been quite heavy-handed with how we get across narrative. And we have been working together. You know, we've been using, you know, very professional writers for a very long time. But I feel like it's only been in the last couple of years that we're telling stories in a way that only games can be, instead of having the insecurity and the inferiority complex to think that we have to do things in another way. Because if we try and tell stories like a movie or like theatre or like television, then we're only ever going to be an inferior version of that. But, you know, a lot of people now, I'm speaking to people and like writers who want to come and move into the game space because we are able to take a lot of risks with what we do. We do have a delivery platform in people's mobile phones that are in every single person in this room's pocket and that we can access for, you know, a very low price. So I think that we can, you know, work together closer on things, but also acknowledge the things that each one of these different kind of like mediums does well.
So what's the difference in storytelling if you're telling a story in a game or in a really kind of linear film? What's the difference? Like, I mean, have you got an opinion?
Well, for me, I think it's either, there's two types of storytelling. There's the kind of passive one, where you sit and watch a story, or you read a book, or you watch a play. And then there's the one where you're the active protagonist of the story, and that includes games. And maybe there's a grey area, which includes kind of like simulations and virtual reality and that kind of thing. So I think as we are given more kind of ways to tell stories, those might blend in some way. But at the moment, I think audiences are still quite hardwired into those stories.
Your story in Monument Valley, or Monument Valley 2, it develops as you play the game. That's right, isn't it? Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, I mean, like, one of the things on, like differences really quickly, is, and I'm not sure whether the other people I know feel the same, is that I have a constant battle with attention spans. Like, not working in another medium, it's like, we need to give someone something in, like, 30-second bursts. And I imagine that if you're working in other stuff, you can at least get a few minutes out of someone before you lose their attention. But, yeah, for us, we need to make everything memorable within 30-second, 1-minute chunks. But yeah, like, sorry, was your question about how we arrive at that story in general?
It's about how the story develops. So I think you told me that the more you play the game, the more it moves on.
So the story we wanted to tell with the second game was, as I said, how that relationship between a parent and a child changes over time and what that means for the game mechanics and the setting and the visual style of things. So if you imagine, we've got two characters. You start off where you control one of the characters and the child just follows. Because when a child's really young, they're just obedient and they follow what you do. They don't want to do their own thing. Well, this is good for somebody who doesn't have kids.
If you're lucky.
This idealistic view of what having children is.
Yeah, please jump in.
But, I mean, after that, so we'll see who's come right. You're going to give me some verification on this now.
Keep in touch.
That's only the first level. The second level, the kid wants to do everything themselves, right? And as it progresses from that, you give them the opportunity to do something for themselves for the first time. And from that moment, you manage to split these characters up and they do things independently. And then as a parent, I'm kind of like some spoilers here. As a parent, you have to learn to let your child go and learn to be an individual and learn to be themselves. So we play levels with them independently. And then eventually, what you hope you get to with your parent is a feeling of parity. You get a little bit older and you treat each other more like friends. So again, it's finding game mechanics that do that. Can we manage to solve puzzles together? Can you start off with throwing game mechanics, making it obvious that one character is reliant on another in terms of how the character uses them. So yeah, I mean, that's roughly the story. And again, trying to tell that over the course of 60 minutes is interesting.
I can imagine.
Sounds beautiful.
Yeah. So, Valentina,
Yes.
I mean, we had a chat in advance, didn't we? And we were talking about what you thought the future of kind of storytelling might be, or kind of animation, because thinking about what kids want to do when they're kind of faced with some animation. So
Yeah, well, it's very difficult to kind of project because, I don't know, and I'm not on the technical side of things, so I don't know what can be actually done. But I remember
can ask Simon about this
when I was a child, and when I still think, like, if I were a child, what would I want to do? If I really loved something and I love a TV series, I'd want to be in it. So I thought, it would be great if, one day my daughter or children could be part of that TV series. I don't know if this is, ever going to be manageable. Where you can have your own character, kind of swap with, one of the characters. And I'm just brainstorming here. But yeah, I think this would probably be more interaction. Things that you were saying, I think we're setting the grounds for this kind of products. Would be great. Also because I think children now learn so much through apps, and the attention span thing you're saying is what actually is going to define also the length probably of this, there is not a word because it would be animated episode / game. We need to find a word for it. But I think that's probably where this is going. I hope, I think.
Before you start, you have to tell.
Absolutely. We talk about this a lot. I've spent 13 years at the BBC this year, and I spent the majority of that trying to persuade them that they should pay attention to where video games are going. So video games have been an incredible influence on my life, a really important part of my life. And the industries, they create amazing worlds for people. And they do the same thing in so many ways in film, television. And it's interesting to watch the games industry learn about television, learn about broadcasting. So the rise of Twitch, the rise of YouTube gaming, Let's Plays. These are games players becoming broadcasters and learning about broadcasting. And people ask questions, what do we think about Twitch? And I'm like, it's not that different to Challenge TV. It's just people playing games. And TV's done that for years. They call them game shows. But the difference is that TV watches the people. And games has always watched the game. And I think you see that changing, and you see that the games are learning about people. And so there'll be whole new games designed to center around the person who's performing them. And that's really interesting because then you get into things like virtual reality, mixed reality, and the sense of the performance and the theater coming into it. And really these are just time-honored skills, and you see writers entering games, and people are just now, it's like games reached a level of maturity and a level of participation as it grew up that now it's okay to be part of that. It's okay to be serious in games. And I make the joke that Minecraft's the most popular cartoon in the world, but it's also one you can play, and it's one you can produce with. And that's, that model in the messages I try and deliver internally is like, don't ignore that. Don't ignore the fact that games like Minecraft, right now it's Fortnite. If you haven't heard of Fortnite or PUBG, you will, and especially if you've got teenage kids.
I went into a school, I was teaching in a school last week, and all the kids did like these workshops for the kids about game design. Every single one of the kids was like, "Do you play Fortnite? Do you play Fortnite?" It's like,
Fortnite, biggest game in the world right now. Absolutely amazing. A very simple game, 100 people. Last one standing wins, but really cartoony and really creative and expressive, and people just want to show themselves performing that. And that's the thing. I think that performance thing's happening, and that's really, really encouraging. And I think that you will see more and more of that. And I just hope that that people respect that new medium emerging and kind of bolster it. And that's part of what the work we do is I try and say, what does that look like? What does the BBC do when everything's interactive and everything is participative? And how do we broadcast that? What does that even mean? And that's a hard question.
So whilst we have all of these amazing people here, does anyone have any questions? Oh, loads. There's a competition here. Someone got a mic, or should we just shout? Do you want to go? Oh.
Does anyone have the energy to shout?
On? Hello? Oh, hi. In terms of storytelling, I'm sure some of you or most of you heard of Telltale Games. I just want to hear your opinion on that kind of medium of storytelling. It being a highly interactive storytelling that could be implemented in TV series. Okay. And even loads of YouTubers have done it before with like multiple outcomes and things like that.
I can talk about that a little. I did 2 years of interactive video. We were incredibly inspired by Telltale Games. The innovation Telltale Games did in terms of choose your own adventure in video games, which wasn't a new thing, was they made a lot of the game take place in your head by putting the emotional relationships with the other characters back on you. So when you had an interaction, your feedback wasn't well done or too like you've done this. It was, they're going to remember that. And you're like, why? Why are they going to remember that? Why is that important? And there were probably only 5 major decisions in those games that in each episode that mattered, but they made you feel like everything you did affected your relationship with another character, and that was massive. I think it's huge. And it was the writing that made the difference there.
So Dan, do you see... Sorry, I scared you, didn't I? I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
Do you see a future for kind of any interactive storytelling within kind of film, or the sorts of content that you look at? It's a really interesting question, but obviously it's something that takes on, all of these other platforms are looking at. So is there something in there for traditional film, or will it always just be that linear storytelling?
I'm not so sure. I'm not sure with that. I can't see how it would happen in terms of film in a cinema space where you're able to choose different outcomes, because it's a collective experience. But if it was...
Perhaps on a different platform.
Yeah. I could see that working, of course, yeah.
I also think it doesn't have to be. I mean, it's the kind of thing that there's something that's so kind of like distilled and core and beautiful about a linear narrative that is the exact way the creator wanted it to be. Like, we always have to do guesswork. We kind of expect you to do this, but it might take 2 minutes, might take 20 minutes. Like, pacing is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And, like, I don't think the way of linear storytelling is going anywhere. Everything will just continue to coexist, It's
a lot more personal, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of, and I suppose your film particularly is quite a personal story in the sense that it's really one-on-one. You feel quite involved in something, and potentially you don't in the same way. Or maybe you do, you feel more immersed in it if you get to choose what's going to happen next.
I mean, it's like two ends of the spectrum. So you've got the kind of stuff that you do, which is like a very much a personal expression, very much from like where you're from and your own experiences and everything else. Then there's what some video games do, which is create an environment for you to create stories yourself. And that is just as powerful. They're powerful in different ways. But the idea that you can say, oh, I did this thing, then this thing happened, then this thing happened. It feels like your story as opposed to somebody else's. But they all sit on this kind of spectrum of storytelling, and they all have, a lot of value.
I think the key difference is the fact that the main character in film, in the traditional sense, is you're relating to a character on screen, whereas virtual reality simulations, games, you become the main character, and that's the sort of thing that I struggle to see.
Yeah.
How there's a thing called 4DX cinema, which is a very visceral cinema. It includes your chair moves around, and there's like air jets in the back of your seat, and there's water sprays in your face.
There used to be something like this on the Granada Studios tour.
There was actually, yeah. But I mean, the difference there was, the Granada Studios cinema. That was a simulation. I think it was RoboCop I went to see, and but you were a character in the film. RoboCop was turning around talking to you, and you would move around in your seat. Whereas this 4DX stuff in a minute, it's just it's a gimmick. That's what I think, really, because it's sort of Marvel films, but you're meant to feel like you're part of the film, but you're not, because you're not in the story.
I just want to touch on the gentleman's question, because I know we went a little bit off track. When it comes to Telltale, like, I really want to see more games like that, and I was disappointed with where they went with things, where basically they got one formula right, and then they went, let's buy IP, and then just layer it over this thing that we already understand, as opposed to saying, how can we tell different stories with these different worlds? And I think that some of the appetite for some of that type of gameplay has deteriorated a little bit because of that decision, but I'm hoping it makes more of a comeback. Like, my friend Ken Wong's game came out yesterday called Florence, and that to me is one of the best examples of storytelling specific, so like you can only do that on a mobile phone. I want to see us do more of that.
Amazing. I've got time for one more question, and it's, sorry.
Thanks. I'm really in awe of all of you, by the way, because I just like Wes Anderson. I love Fantastic Mr. Fox, and Wes Anderson is like my hero, so well done. And Monument Valley, my whole family is obsessed with as well. And the BBC, my family has worked for BBC, so hi.
Have you seen Dan's film yet? You need to watch that so you can get the full set.
Well, no, that's one thing. I'm from Tameside.
It's not been out yet, so you're all right.
Yeah. I'm from Tameside, so I'm really happy that someone has, made a film that represents Tameside, because no one knows where Tameside is.
Of course, no one goes there. Well, we've got an IKEA there now, so that's the one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So but I went to college on the other side of Manchester, and I was like, oh, I'm from Tameside, and everyone's like, is that in Manchester, or like, where are you from? And I'm like, it's like 5 minutes away, but whatever. My question is, because I work for a social media company, I was wondering how you use social media to further your storytelling, is my question.
Valentina's got a good story.
Sky found me on Facebook. So I think, okay, so my vision when I started creating this, when this product started to take shape into my head, was to do a pilot, put it on the internet. Eventually someone would look at it and think,
You did a Kickstarter.
it's
didn't
great.
you?
Yeah, getting there. So how do I get the money to do a pilot? And I went on Kickstarter because I found I had a lot of material, that accumulated over the years, and I felt prepared. And I thought, you know what? If it goes well, it goes well. I get the money and make a pilot, and then I get started. Because I was sure once this product was online, then it would have gotten some attention. So luckily, I didn't even have to make the pilot to get the attention, because the Kickstarter video was enough. I invested into it, and I made a 15 seconds animated sequence where basically I showed the look of the show with little music behind. So you look at it for 10 seconds and you understand if you're gonna like this product or not. And even children, it takes them this long to just look at something and say, more, I want more of that. And more. So this video got shared a lot, the Kickstarter one, and then through Facebook, obviously, and it was shared on the festivals page, which is an animation-related page on Facebook, and Lucy Murphy from Sky is a member, so she went, what's that? Who made that? Can you get me in touch with that? Put me in touch with that person? And here I am. And then Creative England got interested, and so they're both financing my project. So thank you. But social is, going back to your question, is fundamental. I wouldn't have gotten here this fun without it. And I think it's only, if this project is also successful, it will be also determined by how much social things will be created around it, how to keep the children engaged and interested in the characters and all this world that I've created.
I think that's all we have time for. So these guys have got amazing social media stories. You're going to have to ask them in the drinks. And yeah, I think that's us. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.